replacing juniors with AI is one of the dumbest ideas.
Is not really about entry level jobs. It's more about low skilled jobs versus high skilled jobs.
40% of employers expect workforce reductions where AI can automate tasks.
They are changing the traditional career ladder that we saw before is not going to be the same in the future.
Seniority alone isn't protection anymore. It's really AI fluency and who you know and what you know about the company.
Consulting is dead.
If you look at the data right now from 2025 layoffs, roughly 1.17 million people were laid off in the US. It's a collapse. There's AI calamity. There's people are being laid off.
Welcome to the show, Alex. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, Alex, I want to go straight into something that you talk a lot about on your LinkedIn page, which is entry-level jobs and how we see the data that's out there. Approximately 50% of entry-level jobs are declining in the period of 2021 to 2024. And yet we also hear leaders, for example, the CEO of AWS saying that they're not cutting any junior positions. So that there's this mismatch between what's being said by the leaders and also what the actual data is. Can you help us reconcile this two realities?
Yeah, it's an interesting space right now because like some of the stats you gave as well. I mean, the junior job postings overall, I think this year fell around 7% year on year, which is an indicator in itself, but also senior positions have slightly risen as well. So it kind of feels like right now people are buying more into certainty, not potential, which is a little controversial given the fact that I think that flywheel of having junior talent is really important because if you come out of university or you're looking to build skills, what's the best way of doing that? And that's typically entering into the workforce and trying to join the job ladder. So it's a really interesting thing right now, and I think it's going to be a while until we find out exactly what is going on out there at the moment because AI is very new technology, and I think unfortunately, just because of how the world operates now with social media, versus sort of like when the internet came out originally, exposure to things is moving a lot quicker. So I feel like AI right now is becoming more of the convenient explanation for decisions that are being driven a little bit more by cost pressure and uncertainty. And I think Matt Garman from AWS actually calling out replacing juniors with AI is one of the dumbest ideas because without junior talent, eventually your hiring could implode. So I think right now it's just sort of one of those subjects that there isn't really a primary cause, but AI feels like it's the convenient subject for it.
Yeah, so automation is one of the contributing factors of reduction of entry-level jobs. But yeah, I understand that. And then do you think that not hiring for junior positions, companies are actually setting themselves up for a kind of a talent drought in the next 5 years?
I think so. I think the sort of AI washing is essentially, like you said, around sort of the automation pieces. It is critical to making sure that you have people who understand your business and also you are developing talent. It feels a little bit more like people don't really want to invest in that ramp. They want quick solutions. And the automation piece is key, but technology augments what we do. So I would say right now that it feels like we could be going there. It's yet to be seen because I think the data lags historically. So we'll probably find out in the next, I don't know, 6 to 12 months of where we kind of sit with that.
And then we hear, I think it was from Amazon that they will be cutting 75% of their workforce in the next few years. And I cannot quote you the source, but I heard that this data from somewhere. And do you think that this will heavily fall on entry-level jobs or mid-level jobs? What is your sense?
It's interesting because I think it's really going to affect sort of your entry level, but I also think there's sort of this mid-level role. Typically where you have your sort of middle managers or people that are sort of in more senior roles, which could be automated, I think are going to be the ones that are more heavily impacted. I think we're going to see roles more compressed, which is going to be a little bit more of a challenge, I think, overall. And I think it's really this short-term thinking. So I would say right now it's not really like the that AI is breaking the pipeline. I think a lot of companies are really thinking about short-term versus strategically right now. And there's a lot of different factors that come into that. But right now it definitely feels like compression and sort of, I would say, the view overall of short-term thinking.
Hmm. Yeah, we'll get to the mid-level jobs as well in a second, but just before
Mhm.
that, if you're freshly out of school right now, if you're a fresh graduate, what would you say, how should you approach job search and in a way not to panic and not to feel anxiety and stress about the less and less positions and openings?
I would say step away from a computer. I think it's good to stay in tune with what's going on out there and better yourself and keep a tap on what's going on out there. But overall, it really is networking. It's still a who you know game. And what's going to do better for you? Is it going to be filling out 1,000 applications via LinkedIn where everything's being screened by the thing that is trying to automate and better processes, but at the same time, it probably isn't in some ways effective as gauging everyone's skills just to automate a process? Or could you go out and you could mingle with your network who might have exposure to the people that you need to know? And I still think it's really about who you know and being in the pools of people that you want to be with versus just expecting your resume to sort of do the talking for you. I think it's that human component to it is still very critical because people are making the decisions to essentially fill those roles at the end of the day.
And just a second ago, you mentioned AI washing, which I took a note of just to ask you what that means. Can you explain to that? Is it similar to greenwashing? Is it what
Yeah,
people
yeah.
use to say?
Yeah, I think if you just apply the washing to a lot of things, it's sort of you could probably quickly get where I'm going with this. But I think right now there's a lot of companies that are going through changes through there's economical things out there. I mean, if you look at consulting, which I'm sure we'll talk about as well, there's consolidation, there's economic components to things, and they are somewhat missed because we are using the word AI to essentially justify the shortcomings of missing those things. So I would say right now, just the word AI is being used for a lot of things when it's not quite the case. If you look at the data right now from 2025 layoffs, roughly 1.17 million people were laid off in the US. But if you look at the data, roughly only 55,000 of people are explicitly attributed to AI.
Mm,
So when you really look at the data, there's going to be a lot of people out there saying, "Oh, your job's going to get replaced by this and all that,"
yeah.
and it's this augmentation, but it's sort of this. It's just this broad brush that is being used in a number of different ways, and it's because it grabs headlines, it grabs people's attentions, and I think everybody doesn't want to be on doesn't essentially want to miss the train. So yeah, right now there's a lot of that as we can probably all see out there.
Yeah, I think it's important to apply critical lens to hearing why things are changing and why things are, let's say, jobs are going away. It's not just one layer, right? It's structural change, it's political changes, it's economic changes. There are a lot of things, and it's just maybe a very small percentage of it is just attributed to automation in reality, but we hear different things and we just panic and fall into frenzy, which, yeah.
Yeah, I think the one thing that people have got to be cognitive of and listen out for is we overhired or we misread demand. When they are used in articles or stats that cite AI and then those things come up, that's
Mhm.
where you have to sort of look at the lens of, well, actually, there's a bit more to this story. And when you sort of dig into the data, that's when you'll typically find that although headlines might be grasped by AI this, AI that, when you then look further into the data, a lot of it right now is attributed to maybe overhiring in the pandemic or other things that are out there as well.
Mhm. Yeah. And just jumping to mid-level professionals, mid-level
Yeah.
jobs, do you think that, and I think you mentioned it briefly, that people who are holding a mid-level job are more vulnerable, more fragile to risk of automation or being laid off? Did I get that correctly compared to entry-level jobs and why?
Yeah, it's a very tricky thing to sort of explain. But right now, I would say sort of experience is sort of no longer just the thing that matters. It's about judgment. And
Mhm.
one thing that I've been talking to quite a few people about is that middle roles might disappear when value is essentially turning information into things like slides. So, the historical thing that you hear in the consulting world is, oh, consulting companies only generate slideware. And as you see in certain companies, roles control certain output. And when you are compressing those layers, AI isn't eliminating jobs overnight. It's essentially compressing the layers between different roles and essentially the output of that. So I think when it comes to mid-level roles, it's really about what is the output of that role, and what is being augmented or replaced with that. And I think that's something that we're probably going to see over the next 12 to 18 months of certain roles that might be, let's say, a little bit more important, certain companies that are being augmented with AI. We might see a reduction in hiring. We might see some layoffs around that, because they are typically sort of admin related. They could be analyst based. Things that are like, if you think of revenue operations, sales operations, data analysts, that sort of stuff, anything that involves keying stuff into a computer, I think we're going to see a little bit more augmentation around that. I think the one worrying thing that I did see, but was also quite like, okay, let's see if this actually happens, was I think there was an MIT iceberg index recently, and it said about, I think it was about 11.7% of US work is already technically able to be automated by AI. And although exposure is there to a certain degree, it's not imminent to layoffs at the moment. But I think when you see digital transformation happening across companies, of tying systems together and they're talking, and you can then sort of automate those components, that's when I think we're going to see more worrying stats around, people being laid off, or hopefully what we'll be seeing is more of augmentation, which I think would be
Mhm.
far more valuable.
Yeah, to that note, I think augmentation and automation are two things that are impacting the labor market on very different ways, right? So if we look
Hmm.
at the mid-level jobs, then they are more prone to automation, unfortunately, whereas uh, higher skilled work more prone to augmentation. So in this case, I'm not sure if we're going to see more augmentation when it comes to, let's say, data analysts or administrative assistants. I think we're going to see more of automation. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do, and I think the stats sort of right now kind of back up that narrative as well. I think it was the WEF Future of Jobs came out recently with, I think they said around 40% of employers expect workforce reductions where AI can automate tasks. But again, it really comes down to, if you think about a lot of big enterprise companies and a lot of people that are in the stock market, in the US that are publicly traded. There's a lot of big systems out there that are siloed from other technologies in their own company. And until those things are talking to one another, automating a lot of that stuff is hard. It's not literally like just typing something into ChatGPT. It's about interconnected roles and being able to collaborate across multiple pillars. So I think until those things come, um, it could be 12 months, it could be 5 years. It's going to be quite interesting, I think.
Yeah, it's hard to predict exactly the timeline, 12 months to 5 years. Yeah.
I would
And
say on that like the one thing I will say, sorry to interrupt you, is that I think seniority alone isn't protection anymore. It's really AI fluency and who
Mhm.
you know and what you know about the company you're in at the moment. Knowledge is still power to a certain degree.
Yeah, knowledge and skill. And so if you were talking to a mid-level professional or someone who's holding a job like a data analyst or an administrative assistant right now, what would you say is how can they start thinking about essentially future-proofing themselves?
I would say essentially trying to understand more of the landscape of what your business is trying to achieve. So rather than maybe just being given tasks to do and trying to highlight data from that so somebody else can make a decision from that, it would be, I would say, asking more questions and trying to understand if there's any areas of the business that you're in already that you can have more impact or try and understand more from, because the more sticky you are as an individual within a company and the more interesting interested you are in what other people and other teams are doing. Again, it means that you can use your skills off a number of different, pillars within a business, and it also means as well that you can actually understand maybe different technology and things that they're trying to solve for. Which means that you essentially could become more of an architect with that data. So, this one thing that might not be working for your team might be the same issue for another. How could you do that? Well, we could implement some technology, digital transformation, joining of knowledge to make those things happen. So I think it's really sort of stepping outside of your box and challenging not the status quo, but some of the things that might be out there, and showing an interest in it to see what else is going on. But again, I would also say as well, it's AI fluency. So really understanding sort of what could be automated, and also understanding what technology is out there as well.
Mhm. I think AI fluency is an important point here, and so this means that essentially some of the workers right now need to kind of upskill. While it's important to do that on an individual level, who do you think the burden of responsibility falls on when it comes to upskilling an entire population?
I mean, that's a hard question, especially in the US, because it
Yeah.
takes a long time to get anything done. Um, Unfortunately, here. So, I unfortunately I do really think it is on individuals and
Yeah.
companies. Typically, you'll see in more sort of startup type situations, companies are a little bit more agile, so it allows them to put um, ramping and upskilling and those sort of things in play. I did read something, I think it was yesterday, that Walmart was having challenges with hiring individuals who were essentially technically savvy in, I think it was a particular role, or it might have been AI focused. And instead, what they have chosen to do, because they were struggling externally for it, they were actually internally developing a program to actually produce this sort of level of insight or training in a particular role or in AI. So I think, unfortunately, the burden today sits more on individuals, I would say, probably in their personal time, although a
Mhm.
lot of companies out there are touting that they're implementing like the latest AI and all this sort of stuff. I think there's a very big disproportion between sort of knowledge and what's actually going on, I would say, in those two situations.
Hmm. And one thing that you mentioned, which is experience is no longer the most important thing when it comes to hiring, or for example, right? So, for example, if you have 25, I just want to make sure if I understand this clearly. If I have 25 years of experience in one job, do you think in the future we're going to see less and less emphasis on the experience? Let's say I have 25 years of experience in this space, and more importance on what skills you have, specifically probably AI related ones.
Yeah, I think with the potential elimination of certain roles because they could be achieved by AI automation or augmentations in those roles. If you've potentially been working in operations in a company, maybe it's sales operations, payroll, things like that. Um, that might not be as important as potentially having skills in, I don't know, different types of AI technology, or having knowledge in different parts of a company, or certain specifics. I think that's going to become really sort of front and center in how workforces change, because I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that maybe things that are sort of data entry related, the whole point of AI is to essentially eliminate manual tasks and make teams more effective. So I think the key piece is making companies and teams more effective, and that those sort of classic roles that might be a little bit more sort of admin related are going to become in a little bit more strategic, I would say, in a company.
Hmm. And one thing you said, which is it might become more important to know different parts of the
Mhm.
organization work, or do you think that brings me to an interesting question? Do you think that we're going to see more and more people, more and more generalists versus specialists in the future?
I think that's a really interesting point. I think that is probably going to be the case. I mean, I, I can't say with all certainty about that, but I think just as what we've been seeing trending so far in layoffs and the roles that remain, people that I've spoken to, and that's leaders in certain companies, there is more focus on how are certain roles a little bit more strategic, and how are those people having more of an impact within a company. So yeah, I'd agree with that.
Hmm. Okay, interesting. Talking about the knowledge workers, and
Hmm.
we have a huge number of knowledge workers in the consulting space.
Yeah.
So, and we hear so many controversial opinions about consulting industry these days. We have a camp that says consulting is dead or slowly dying out. And then we have another camp
Hmm.
that says consultants are actually might become more indispensable in the future with the help of AI. Which camps do you belong to? Or is there maybe a middle that you would say is more accurate?
I would say I'm more on the latter side of it. I think there is a general, it's really interesting, the whole consulting space, because I think at times people do not realize the value that consulting companies bring to the table. I think there's, I won't name any names, but there's some obvious reasons why people don't like certain companies out there for a lot of reasons. But when you think about consulting as a whole, a lot of these companies have domain expertise. So it could be technology, it could be an industry. They've worked in the space for a long time. So when you're trying to bring potentially a company that, like I mentioned earlier on, about a company that's on the S&P 500, for instance, and they have lots of old software or siloed software that doesn't talk to one another.
Mhm.
Somebody that works in marketing probably isn't going to be the best person to go, oh yeah, I can actually show how know which technology is going to link into this team's technology and this team's technology. You need somebody externally who can project manage that and has the experience to do that. And I think that's where I think consultancies are going to bring a lot more impact around how to implement, how to augment, how to have more effectiveness, and I think that's even going to show, or we're seeing right now, how that's even showing in their own companies and how they're sort of trying to future-proof themselves so they add more value and don't get that existing label of they only make slideware, which is bullshit. So
Yeah, that's
yeah,
true. Yeah, I agree. I agree that it's not just about the slides, right? Obviously, we have a huge industry, and like if there was no value, it would have died out a long time ago. So yeah. But
it's
do
a
you think
reset.
yeah, so you think that there's going to be a reset in terms of how consulting firms will be operating in the future? It's not going to be the same. There's going to be some
Yeah.
restructuring.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're already seeing that, and I think the consulting world, along with the advertising and marketing world, is very much in sort of the same space right now because a lot of those consultancies also do an element of technology transformation and things like that as well. So I think what we're going to see is what's going to grab headlines is it's a collapse. There's AI calamity. There's people are being laid off and all that sort of stuff. But it's really a delivery model reset. And the signals I would say that we're seeing around that is flat revenue. Again, this comes into what we were talking about earlier on around AI washing. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think McKinsey reported for the past 4 years that revenue's been from 15 to 16 billion. So you can't really say that it's an impact because of just AI. It's really because, I mean, revenue's been flat. So we have to sort of lay people off and work out how we can be more strategic versus, just saying that, it was because of AI. And there's a lot of AI and automation that's coming into those discussions as well. I mean, you've got Omnicom that's just bought IPG for $13 billion. They've laid off 4,000 people, and that's because there's consolidation of, workforces, tooling, and a reduction in platforms. So I think we're going to just see with everyone's been fighting for a long time over the same dollars. Now, because there's people are trying to spend money more effectively, that has a knock-on effect to the consultancies and the agencies out there as well. So I think it's going to be more around efficiencies and how to scale better in the future.
Hmm. Hmm. And traditionally, consulting firms have a pyramid structure or model, pyramid model, where they are very heavy on the bottom. So there are a lot of junior experts on the team. And then now we're seeing, or we're reading a lot of headlines that this is changing, and from a pyramid model, it's going to turn into an obelisk model, or kind of a slight pinched hourglass model. Um, do you think that is going to happen, and do you see that slowly happening? What is your stance?
I think we are seeing it happening already. I think that just some of the numbers that have come out from a number of different firms and also just the narratives from those leaders. I mean, Accenture went through a massive change this year of how they were sort of trying to be way more strategic in the outcomes that they were trying to drive, and that meant that they essentially restructured. We've just seen it with WPP with their new leadership change and how they're trying to move things as well. So I would say I spoke about earlier on around sort of the slideware comment. I think the typical view has been the bottom of the pyramid is somebody comes into the company and they've just come out of university and they're just making slideware for people. That obviously that isn't 100% right, but I think flattening those things that are more sort of junior and turning those roles into more strategic and more specialized means that that layer has to shrink slightly, and I think we're going to see more of a an hourglass or more of like a flywheel where it's all based on demand. So if you've got more specialized roles that are around operations and things like that, it has to change. So that would be my kind of only real comment on that. I would say they a lot of these companies want more outcome based results versus just paying for hours, and that's where that model has to sort of shrink to essentially drive that.
Yeah, and I think a big contribution to that will be tools like, for example, I think McKinsey has Lilly, which does most of the
Yes.
research,
Yeah.
and I think it's cut research by 30%. So now that has taken a huge burden off of the junior workers, right? Do you think that they are changing the traditional career ladder that we saw before is not going to be the same in the future? And how do you think that going to change?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. A lot has been changing. I think we started seeing this around sort of 2022 when we had the SaaS crash, where we saw the largest unemployment rate around the technology sector and a lot of layoffs around that. We started seeing job titles becoming a little less meaningful. And I think now what we're going to see is what matters for the economic function inside an organization. So it's really going to come down to, do you own a measurable outcome? Do you design workflows that make others faster, augmented with AI? Am I trusted within an organization to do what you need to do? And I think when it comes to those entry positions, that's where we're going to see things change more. And it's got a big question mark against it because I think we've already seen it in the last year or 2 years that we're not seeing as many entry level jobs, and I think I'd also put a question mark against like what is an entry level job,
Mm,
because it does have a big question mark to it as well, because
yeah.
a lot of people are staying in the roles longer, a lot of people are protecting their roles a lot longer as well. So I think we're going to see companies that are really, they really want to invest in talent and future talent, um, where there's going to be a lot more, not a lot more, but there's going to be more focus on um, hiring more junior talent. I wouldn't say entry roles, I would say junior talent in a
Mm,
specific field. But I think things that are very much sort of admin related, entry level, of like data, things like that, that's where we're going to see more reduction in that area. So, yeah, I would say specialization is probably key.
yeah, so we can make an inference is not really about entry level jobs. It's more about low skilled jobs versus high skilled jobs
Yes. Yeah.
versus the experience, as you mentioned before. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, okay, Alex, if you were 25 again, and I'm not sure how old are you, by the way. You don't
I
look
was going
that
to say
old.
to I don't look 25. Wow.
You don't look that far from 24, let me put it that way.
It's
But
very kind of you.
if you were 25 again and you didn't have a brand or any safety net or any experience whatsoever, what would you double down on now? Is it building a brand, which you have successfully done on LinkedIn? Is it something else? What is it that you would really double down on?
A network. And this is one of the things that I'm very passionate about, and why I think working in the partnership space is has really worked well for me, and a lot of the people that I connect with in my network as well believe the same thing as well. It's the industry that I work in with partnerships. It's about having a connection with people, but actually having a connection with people. It's about relationships that matter, that can then drive outcomes. And I think if I was 25 but now, um, that would be my biggest recommendation for people, because at the end of the day, I mean, having somebody as a LinkedIn connection and not knowing them isn't really going to help you in any way, shape, or form. Yes, having a degree in something is amazing, that people have put themselves through that. A lot of knowledge, but knowledge without application, knowledge without a network, knowledge without relationships, it is sort of by itself. And I think there's a lot of layers to different things, and it's sort of like a cake. You need to have a number of different things to it. So I would say um, a safety net is hard these days. You could be in the most senior role and the company does layoffs and poof, you're gone. So I would just say it's about who you know, and making an effort to actually get to know people in your network, because they're probably going to be a lot more helpful to you than a recruiter will be. So that would be I would say that would be my main piece of advice.
Yeah, and I think these days it's pretty hard to actually build relationships that are meaningful because what we do is we just add someone on LinkedIn and that's it. We consider them in our network, but they're really not. So, what does it
Yep.
actually mean to build a meaningful relationship from someone who is a VP of partnerships?
I would say it's making a conscious effort to get to know people that are around you. So one of the things that I pride myself on with like the partnerships program that I've been building at our company, and what I've done over the years is it's remembering people's names. It's making sure you connect with people, because you at the end of the day don't know what people are going through, and sometimes you reaching out and saying, "Hey, can you chat?" Um, Making a conscious effort to get to know the person behind the screen, whether that's virtually or in person, can have a huge impact versus treating stuff as a transactional approach. In my line of work, where partnerships are seen to help service your clients, they're seen to driving new revenue, reselling, that sort of stuff. If you see somebody in your network as just a transaction, then they're not really going to want to do anything for you. And why should they? So I think it's really important to make those connections and make them meaningful, because if there's no meaning to the work you're doing, then why are you doing it? So that's one of the things that I try and make sure that I do actively with the program that we've got at the moment. Regular connections with people, but also in my own network, I try and connect with a handful of people each month that I might not have ever connected with before properly, that are in my network, and try and get to know them better, because you never know at the end of the day who can help you learn something new, but also you can help them, and they can be there, or you can be there when they are going through something, which happens.
Mm. Uh, Thank you so much. That was great. If you're ready to make that 1 degree shift towards massive transformation, then hit that subscribe button and join the MetaSelf community because sometimes one idea is all that takes for a breakthrough.